Today, on the Mountaintop, our focus is ragtime.
Welcome to Wonderstone Entertainment.
In the closing years of the 19th century, when the South still trembled with the memory of Reconstruction and the Midwest pulsed with the promise of new horizons, a sound began to stir. Quiet at first, then insistent, like footsteps learning their own rhythm. It was born in the African-American communities of the South and Midwest, in the boarding houses of St. Louis, the parlor rooms of Sedalia, the river towns of Missouri, and the bustling corners of black neighborhoods stretching from Arkansas to Illinois. A music stitched together from lived experience, hardship and humor, sorrow and celebration, the sacred echoes of spirituals, and the everyday syncopation of life. This music would come to be called ragtime, but in those early days it was simply the sound of a people transforming rhythm into resilience. The roots of ragtime reached back to the African polyrhythms carried in memory and muscle across generations, rhythms that survived fields, endured rail lines, and shaped the sensibilities of a people who knew how to make joy in any circumstance. Layered into these were the influences of the American landscape itself, the military marches heard on courthouse lawns, the parlor music introduced through battered upright pianos, and the folk traditions that traveled from cabin to cabin, church to church, community to community. When these sounds collided, they conversed. In barbershops and saloons, in dance halls and traveling shows, black musicians experimented with the piano the way a painter experiments with color, discovering that if you shifted the beat just slightly, if you tugged the melody off the expected path, something new emerged. They called it ragging the tune. Syncopation became a signature, a wink, a refusal to stay inside the lines. This is good, much like the compositions of a young composer named Scot Joplin. Think you don't know this guy? Listen to this. And this. Both compositions are the creations of Scot Joplin, but neither of these guys are Scot Joplin. But this is. Long before ragtime was called ragtime, long before anyone argued about whether it was real music, there was a boy named Scot Joplin. He grew up in a world where pianos were mostly used for hymns and marches. Those tunes stepped politely in line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like soldiers on parade. But young Scot, he didn't march. He wandered. Whenever he sat at a piano, he pushed the beat sideways. His left hand kept time like a metronome. Scot Joplin studied theory by day and played for dancers by night. He listened as working men tapped shoes against wooden floors, as black families gathered around pianos brought north by migrating relatives. He absorbed their stories, their aches, their laughter, and shaped them into music that could be both precise on the page and alive in the soul. Joplin's compositions gave ragtime dignity, form, and elegance. But the spirit of the genre, the fire underneath, belonged to the communities that nurtured it long before it reached formal halls. By the 1890s, ragtime had become more than music. It was a declaration, a declaration that African-American creativity was not only present in the nation's cultural fabric, it was foundational. A declaration that joy could be intellectual, that rhythm could be rebellion, that a simple piano could speak for an entire generation, carving out identity in a rapidly changing America. From Sedalia's Maple Leaf Club to the crowded streets of St. Louis during the 1904 World's Fair, ragtime spread like electricity, alive, exhilarating, unstoppable. And though many would later forget the communities where it began, the truth remains. Ragtime was born from the genius, perseverance, and artistic courage of African Americans in the South and Midwest, individuals who took the fragments of two worlds and forged something wholly, defiantly new.
Feel the beat sway, we're gonna chase those blues away.
Ragtime would lay the groundwork for the blues, for jazz, for the soundtrack of the American century. This was the beginning. This was ragtime. This was the sound of a people finding their voice and making the nation listen. By the 1890s, Sedalia was a railroad town, full of saloons, barbershops, dance halls, and the kind of bustling energy that made the air hum. Inside, one such saloon stood a battered upright piano, its keys yellowed and chipped. But in the evenings, when Scot Joplin sat down, the place transformed. Men playing cards froze. Women carrying trays stopped mid-step. And the entire room bent itself around the angular, surprising, irresistible sound. People eventually had a name for it.
Ragtime! No! Ragtime!
Ragged time, ragtime. Syncopated. Unexpected. Joyful. Defiant. It became the soundtrack of a changing America, where freed black musicians were shaping cultural ideas in ways no one could have predicted. When Joplin published Maple Leaf Rag in 1899, everything changed. It swept the nation like a musical wildfire. Parlor pianos from New York to San Francisco tried to mimic the bouncing rhythms, even beginners banging out the wrong notes with enthusiasm. And soon, other names became stars of the new genre. James Scott, a quiet genius from Missouri whose ragtime works were complex, dreamy, and surprisingly soulful. Scott's professional breakthrough came when he traveled to St. Louis in 1905 and met Scot Joplin, who recognized his talent and encouraged him to submit his work to John Stark, the leading ragtime publisher of the era. In 1914, Scott moved to Kansas City, where he spent the rest of his life teaching music, leading small ensembles, and accompanying silent films in local theaters. Piano Joseph Lamb, a white composer from New Jersey who loved ragtime so much he traveled across states to meet Joplin himself. Joplin was so impressed he personally introduced Lamb to a publisher, making him one of the few white composers who truly earned respect in the genre. U.B. Blake was an American composer, pianist, and pioneer of early popular music whose career spanned nearly a century. A showman, pianist, and entertainer whose flashy ragtime style helped bridge the music into early jazz. And then there were the unsung players. Female composers whose work has been rediscovered only in modern times. Barbershop pianists who improvised for dancers in smoky rooms. Traveling musicians who carried ragtime across dusty roads and riverboats. Some never published. Some were never welcomed into fancy music halls. Some remained nameless, but the rhythm they passed along stayed alive. But not everyone was tapping their foot. Ragtime had its critics. Some called it noise. Some said it was corrupting youth. Some insisted the syncopation would, quote, damage a person's sense of rhythm permanently. Church leaders preached sermons against that raggedy piano music. Music professors wrote angry essays. Parents feared their children were learning dancing music, but the young people, oh boy, they loved it. Ragtime wasn't just a trend. It was a cultural shift, a declaration that music belonged to everyone, not just the trained, the wealthy, or the traditionally accepted. Joplin died April 1, 1917. Yet the seeds he planted would continue to bloom many years later. Throughout the generations, Joplin's ragtime has grown more than music, more than jazz. It has grown a culture. It has grown life.